Day 1138 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 923,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,330 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 13 tanks, 20 APVs, 56 artillery, and 4 rocket launchers. And now to the map we go, as large Ukrainian strike drones targeted key Russian industrial sites over the weekend, successfully hitting the Promsyntez chemical plant in Chapevsk and the optical fiber systems plant in Saransk. The latter, Russia's sole producer of 4 million kilometers of fiber optic cables annually, is crucial for controlling their frontline drones, with the facility now heavily damaged and set ablaze. Russian Z channels are in disarray over the incident, unable to comprehend the attacks and squabbling over who is to blame. And with this such strike that travelled over 750 kilometers deep into Russian airspace, it's no wonder they're looking to point fingers for this latest airspace breach. Especially given how one of these unmanned aerial vehicles was a Ukrainian A-22 Foxbat attack drone, formerly a manned aircraft, and of course is not exactly the most stealthy of weapons, having a design that should be flashing up all over Russian radars. But as it so happens, Ukraine takes advantage of significant gaps in Russia's air defense layers, which enables this slow and low-flying unmanned aircraft to perform its targeting duties. Even though it would appear as if anyone's one-eyed grandma could down this with a 12-gauge shotgun. Next on the map, heading to Belgorod, where just this morning Ukrainian forces advanced up to 600 meters into the Russian position near Popovka, as per Russian mill blogger Romanov. As a result, Russia's 34th Brigade retreated, losing ground, with it being stated that their 155th Marine Brigade is reportedly counterattacking to reclaim lost positions. Then headed across into the Kursk region, where Ukrainian forces have repelled 17 Russian army assaults in the past day, with it being reported that Russia still maintains a presence of 64,000 soldiers along the line of combat in this region, including those areas directly bordering Sumy. In other words, you could say that's 64,000 troops that are not inside of eastern Ukraine fighting. Now to the Ukrainian map, into Kharkiv, where the armed forces of Russia were dealt some blows due to an advancement of Ukrainian forces in several fields to the west of occupied Tebevka. But also, just east of this location, a Russian SAM, a Buk M2, was destroyed earlier in the weekend in the bordering Luhansk region. These air defense units can operate autonomously with their transporter, erector launcher, and radar design, aka TELAR units, and come at a cost of about $14 million apiece. Another devastating blow to Moscovia's war machine. Then we head south as Russian forces continued their forward march near Katerinivka, specifically 5 kilometers east of the town, as they continue their efforts to reach the connecting main road to that settlement. And so we see this combination of gains and losses by both sides on this part of the map, and all over, which is often referred to as a stalemate, though it's not a prolonged deadlock, meaning that it can be much better characterized as incremental clashes or patchwork skirmishes or trench warfare, reflecting the scattered, incremental land gains and losses by both sides. However, should we zoom out of the map and consider the dynamic to be one more of a protracted stalemate, well then, battlefield stalemates are, as a general rule, overwhelmingly favoring the defender, as they can hold fortified positions, conserve resources, and force the attacker to expend more effort to break through. Take, for instance, overall Russian advances in the past 12 months have averaged 100 meters per day at the cost of 5 armored divisions. This cuts to the core of why their breakthrough attempts have become so costly, leading to the now often seen Russian two-wheel army, and sometimes even donkey logistics army. Next on the map, headed back to Pokrovsk, where nearly half of all clashes can be found, with 65 clashes reported near this main town in the past day alone. And so to take a Russian perspective on this front, from this two-wheeler wheeled in a Russian soldier traveling through the rear of the region, showcasing Russia's steel graveyard, saying of it, quote, "There is no rear as such. Any concentration of our troops is identified and destroyed. Assault groups of 2 people inspect positions after they have been dispersed by drones. Then 2 more fighters come to reinforce and 2 more to consolidate. Instead of traditional dugouts and trenches, individual cell holes are dug. There is no longer a safe time of day. Evacuating a wounded person would be considered a great success under these conditions." He also said, quote, "Reality has turned traditional military science inside out. All this needs to be understood." As he suggests his military command doesn't possess this type of on-the-ground frontline insight. Then headed across on the map to Kherson, where we see some of the atmosphere of the Kherson Islands, as per a video from the soldiers of the 73rd Naval Center of the Special Operations Forces, the Kherson Islands being the long-contested Dnipro River Delta Islands. Also at this front, Atesh partisans of the occupied territory advise that Russians in Kherson have switched to wired comms only, as their 14th Army Corps ordered a full ban on cell phone use after precision strikes via SIGINT, which is to say that Ukrainian forces used signals intelligence through intercepting and analyzing Russian mobile communications to locate and target the 14th Army Corps with precision strikes. The problem here is that the occupying forces are not a professionally trained army and are not equipped with standardized and encrypted communications protocols. It might even amuse you to hear that Russian soldiers spill OPSEC information using Ukrainian cell towers to make calls among themselves, especially near to the front lines where Russian communication networks are weak or absent. These frontline call intercepts can become very valuable for Ukraine's intelligence apparatus. One moment, 2 Russians are on the phone talking about their locations near the contact point. The next moment, a military jet of the Ukrainian Air Force is scrambled to strike on those identified and very same positions. Then taking a quick look around the map as a no analogs T-90M tank of the Russian forces was destroyed by an FPV drone. Also seen was how the party was over for Russian occupiers near Chasiv Yar in Donetsk, when their very vulnerable appearing vehicle, evidently vulnerable, had succumbed to Ukrainian FPV fire. Another example to show was a destroyed Russian BTR-82A APC located somewhere in the Luhansk region. Then headed across to some news for today. So according to NATO intelligence, most recent updates suggest that there is no sign that Russia is preparing for a ceasefire, but also that Russia continues to increase pressure along the entire front line in order to buy time and increase its advantage for what it expects to be a more advantageous position for future negotiations. This analysis comes as Russia is reported to have recently assigned another 150,000 personnel for spring-summer offensive campaigns within the SMO, which is a figure that is in addition to their existing forces deployed. NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte gave an interview to Ukrainian outlet New Voice yesterday, stating that the first level of security guarantees for Ukraine should be the Ukrainian military, which is the first line of defense in deterrence. However, Rutte also added that Ukraine's European partners, including France, the United Kingdom, and Italy, are also looking for ways to provide security guarantees to Ukraine following the conclusion of a peace agreement, as it continues to be assessed that from a NATO standpoint, that a strong Ukrainian military backed by Western security guarantees remains the most vital component of a post-war European security architecture, guaranteeing a sustainable peace in Ukraine and deterring future Russian aggression. You could say that they see no other way. Then to some related news, as this all comes as President Zelensky, in his nightly address, when referring to ceasefire agreements, stated that it is necessary to put pressure on Russia, real pressure, without wasting time on empty talks, referring to Russia's continued stalling tactics on ceasefire deals. Shown in these images is a typical and most recent example of how a 30-day unconditional ceasefire was not found to be acceptable by the Kremlin, leading to Ukrainians moving to underground shelters at 5 a.m. to protect themselves from missiles and drones. In this case, Russia was firing onto the Ukrainian capital. It's a situation that almost acts like tying Ukraine's hands, while somehow ending up affording Russia the ability to fire missiles from afar onto Ukrainian cities, but at the same time protecting Russia's oil and other energy infrastructure in the process. Ultimately, there's only 11 days left until the original 30-day partially active ceasefire is over, which will be no doubt followed by a detailed summary on how respectful each party was considered to be on the terms during this period. That will be interesting to dissect. Then to a brief Ukrainian hardware news update, as Ukrainian UAV interceptors of Russian drones continues to innovate and update. Seen here, the main advantage of this such winged interceptor drone over the standard quadcopter designs is the increased range and flight time. Specifically, this model can patrol the airspace with a radius of 35 kilometers. The quadcopter interceptors, on the other hand, although very fast, have a patrol radius of something closer to 5 to 10 kilometers, or about 3 to 6 miles. Then to round off the video with a bit of a funny or lighter segment relating to events happening somewhere in the east, as Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance witnessed some of the most brutal and intense ultra-close quarters combat found on the front lines of the battlefield. Two pairs of marmots fighting. These groundhog-like burrowing creatures that inhabit Ukrainian plains typically emerge in early spring and clash during breeding season to establish dominance, but perhaps with an outside chance of a clash for control or dominance of the very best artillery shell craters that the lands have to offer. This little guy hiding on the edge of the screen footage is keeping things quite professional instead, opting for a more diplomatic approach to land, as opposed to aggressively invading other marmot burrows. How very un-Russian of him. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.